On the coldest day of winter, a little boy stood beside his mother's lifeless body, while the whole town walked away. But one man stopped, and that single decision changed both of their lives forever. The silent street. The wind howled through the narrow wooden streets of Red Hollow, carrying with it a bitter cold that seemed to bite straight through bone. Snow had been falling since dawn, blanketing the town in a heavy white silence. Most folks had already shut themselves inside. Doors locked, curtains drawn, fires burning low, but not everyone. Near the edge of the street, beside an old wooden bench, a small boy stood trembling. His clothes were thin, worn, and far too light for the freezing storm. His boots were mismatched. One of them had a hole near the toe, letting in snow with every step. He couldn't have been more than 6. "Ma," he whispered, his voice barely louder than the wind. "Ma, please wake up." On the bench beside him lay a woman. Her skin was pale, her lips slightly blue. Snow had begun to settle on her hair and shoulders, unmoving. The boy shook her gently. "Ma, you gotta get up, we gotta go home." But she didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't answer. The boy swallowed hard, his small hands shaking. He didn't understand death, not fully. But he understood something was terribly wrong. People passed by, they looked, they slowed, but then they kept walking. In the Wild West, survival came first. Trouble was something folks avoided, not embraced. And this looked like trouble. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry loudly. He just stood there, waiting, hoping, praying. The man in black. Across the street, a figure stepped out from the swinging doors of a saloon. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a long dark coat dusted with snow. A black hat shadowed his face, but beneath it was a pair of sharp, watchful eyes. The kind that had seen too much. His name was Caleb Vance, and most people in Red Hollow knew better than to cross him. Some said he used to be a lawman. Others whispered he was worse than the outlaws he hunted. But no one knew the full truth. And no one asked. Caleb paused as he lit a cigarette, the flame flickering briefly against the wind. That's when he heard it. "Mister." The voice was small, weak. He turned. The boy stood there, staring straight at him. Eyes wide, desperate. "Mister, my mom, she won't wake up." Caleb said nothing at first. He just watched, measured. Then his gaze shifted to the woman on the bench. He walked slowly across the street, boots crunching against the snow. Each step steady, controlled. The boy stepped closer to him, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "You can help her, right?" the boy asked. Caleb knelt beside the woman. 2 fingers pressed gently against her neck. He already knew, but he checked anyway. Nothing. No pulse. No warmth. She'd been gone for hours. Caleb exhaled slowly, the cold air forming a cloud in front of him. The boy waited. "She just needs rest, right?" the boy said quietly. Caleb looked at him, and for a brief moment, something shifted in his expression. Something human. "What's your name, kid?" Caleb asked. "Eli," the boy replied. "Eli Turner." Caleb nodded once. Then he stood. "She ain't sleepin', Eli," he said quietly. "She's gone." The words hung in the air. Heavy, cold. The boy blinked, confused. "Gone where?" he asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. Because there was no easy way to explain death to a child standing alone in the snow. A town that looked away. A few townsfolk had gathered at a distance now, watching, whispering, but still not stepping forward. "Someone should do something." "Not my problem. Sheriff ain't here till morning." Caleb heard them, every word, and it made his jaw tighten. Eli tugged gently at Caleb's coat. "Mister, what do I do now?" That question hit harder than anything else. Because Caleb Vance didn't have answers like that. Not anymore. He had spent years living alone. No attachments, no responsibilities, no past worth remembering. Helping people, that wasn't who he was anymore. But still, He looked down at the boy, shivering, alone, standing beside his dead mother in the middle of a storm, and something inside him, something buried long ago, refused to stay silent. Caleb sighed. Then he removed his coat, wrapped it around Eli's small shoulders. The boy looked up at him, surprised. "You'll freeze," Eli said. "I'll manage," Caleb replied. "The first choice." Caleb turned toward the watching crowd. "Y'all just gonna stand there?" he said, his voice low but sharp. "Or one of you gonna help me?" No one moved. "Typical," Caleb muttered under his breath. Then he bent down and gently lifted the woman into his arms. Eli's eyes widened. "Where are we going?" the boy asked. Caleb looked at him. "Somewhere warm." And just like that, without another word, the most feared man in Red Hollow began walking through the snow, carrying a lifeless woman. And leading a boy who had no one left in the world. The cabin in the woods. The storm didn't let up. Snow fell harder now, thick and blinding, as Caleb Vance pushed forward through the narrow trail that led out of Red Hollow. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by white and silence. Eli struggled to keep up, his tiny legs sinking into the snow with every step. "Are we almost there?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Almost," Caleb replied, though they still had a long way to go. Caleb adjusted the woman's weight in his arms. She felt heavier now, not just in body, but in meaning. He hadn't carried someone like this in years. Not since. He stopped that thought before it could finish. They finally reached a small clearing. At the edge stood a cabin. Old, quiet, hidden among tall pine trees. It wasn't much, but it was warm. Inside the cabin, Caleb kicked the door open with his boot and stepped inside. The fire had long gone out, leaving the place cold and still. "Stay there," he told Eli. He gently laid the woman down on a wooden table near the wall. Then he moved quickly, like a man who knew exactly what to do. Logs into the fireplace. Flint struck. A spark. Then flame. Within minutes, the cabin began to breathe again, warmth slowly pushing back the cold. Eli stood near the door, clutching the oversized coat wrapped around him. Is my mom gonna wake up now?" he asked softly. Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed a blanket and covered the woman respectfully. Not hiding her, but giving her dignity. Eli watched everything, his small face full of questions and fear. A hard truth. Caleb finally turned toward him. "Come sit," he said. Eli walked slowly, sitting on a wooden chair near the fire. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the crackling of the flames filled the room. Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You got any other family?" he asked. Eli shook his head. "No, sir, just me and Ma." Caleb nodded once. He had expected that. "What were you doing out there?" Caleb asked. "We were trying to get to town," Eli said. "Ma said we'd find work, maybe a place to stay." His voice trembled. "But she got sick, real sick, and then she just laid down." He looked toward the table, and didn't get up. Silence again, this time heavier. Caleb looked away, jaw tight. He had heard stories like this before. Too many. But hearing it from a child, that was different. The past comes back. Caleb stepped outside for a moment, letting the cold air hit his face. He needed it, needed distance. But instead, memories came. A different winter, a different storm, a woman's voice, a child crying, and himself. Too late. He clenched his fist. "No," he muttered. He had buried that life. Buried the man he used to be. The man who tried to save people. And failed. Caleb exhaled slowly, then stepped back inside. An unexpected bond. Eli had moved closer to the fire now, his small hands stretched toward the warmth. "You live here?" Eli asked. "Yeah," Caleb said. "All alone?" "Yeah." Eli nodded, like he understood more than he should. Then he looked up. "You saved us." Caleb frowned slightly. "I didn't save anyone," he said. But you carried my mom, and you brought me here, Eli replied. That hit something deep. Caleb looked at the boy. So small, so certain, and for the first time in a long while, Caleb didn't have a comeback. Night falls. The storm raged outside as night fell over the cabin. Caleb made a simple meal, just some bread and stew. Eli ate quietly, clearly starving but trying to be polite. Thank you, Eli said after finishing. Caleb nodded. You can sleep there, he said, pointing to a small bed in the corner. Eli hesitated. Then he asked softly, Can I say goodbye to my mom first? Caleb paused, then gave a small nod. Eli walked slowly to the table. He reached up, his tiny hand touching the blanket gently. Good night, Ma, he whispered. I'll be right here. Caleb turned away, giving him that moment. Because some things shouldn't be watched. A promise unspoken. Later that night, Eli slept, curled up under thick blankets. Safe, for the first time in days. Caleb sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He hadn't planned any of this. Hadn't wanted it. But now, there was a boy sleeping under his roof. A boy with no one else. Caleb rubbed his face slowly. What now? He muttered. Because deep down, he already knew. This wasn't just one night. This was a choice. And choices had consequences. A shadow approaches. Far from the cabin, back in Red Hollow, a man stepped into the sheriff's office. Tall, rough-looking, with cold eyes. You seen a woman and a kid come through here? He asked. The deputy shook his head. Why? The man smirked slightly. They owe me something. He turned, stepping back out into the night. Won't be hard to find, he muttered. Not in this weather. The storm brings trouble. The night grew darker. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. Outside, the storm had softened, but the silence it left behind felt even heavier. Caleb hadn't slept. He sat in a chair near the window, a rifle resting across his lap, eyes fixed on the trees beyond the glass. Something didn't feel right. Years of living on the edge had taught him one thing: trouble rarely stayed behind. And tonight, it was coming. A quiet warning. A faint sound broke the silence. Crunch. Snow. Footsteps. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Slow. Careful. Not the random movement of animals. This was someone tracking. He stood up without making a sound. Checked the rifle. Loaded. Ready. Another step outside. Closer now. Caleb glanced toward Eli, who was still asleep under the blankets, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. For a moment, Caleb considered something he hadn't done in years. Running. Taking the boy and disappearing before trouble arrived. But then he looked at the table, where Eli's mother lay, covered with a blanket. Running wasn't an option. Not this time. The man from town. A shadow moved between the trees. Then a voice called out from the darkness. I know you're in there. Caleb didn't respond. The door handle shifted slightly, testing. Locked. Don't make this difficult, the voice said again, colder now. I'm just here for the boy. Caleb's jaw tightened. So it was about Eli. He stepped forward, opening the door just enough to see outside. The man stood a few feet away. Tall, heavy coat, a revolver hanging low at his side. Same man from Red Hollow. Same cold eyes. You got business here? Caleb asked calmly. The man smirked. Yeah, kid inside owes me. Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. He don't owe you nothing. The man chuckled. His mama did. Took money. Never paid it back. Caleb's expression didn't change. Then you're too late, he said flatly. A flicker of annoyance crossed the man's face. Yeah, I heard, he said. Shame, really. His eyes darkened. But debts don't die with people. He stepped forward slightly. So I'll take the boy instead. A line is drawn. For a second, the world went still. The wind stopped. The trees stood frozen. Even the fire behind Caleb seemed quieter. Then Caleb stepped fully outside, closing the door behind him. No, he said, just one word, but it carried weight. The man laughed softly. You really wanna do this? He asked. Over a kid you just met? Caleb's eyes hardened. You picked the wrong door, he replied. The man's hand moved slightly toward his gun. Big mistake. The gunfight. The shot rang out like thunder. But it wasn't the man's. Caleb was faster. Always had been. The bullet hit the man's shoulder, spinning him backward into the snow. He grunted in pain, clutching his arm as blood stained the white ground beneath him. But he wasn't done. He fired back wildly, one shot, then another. The bullet struck the cabin wall, splintering wood. Inside, Eli woke with a frightened gasp. Mister, he cried out. Caleb didn't turn, didn't look back. He stepped forward, calm and steady, aiming again. Don't, the man growled, raising his gun despite the pain. Caleb fired once more. This time, the man dropped. Silent, still, the echo of the gunshot faded into the trees. And then, nothing. After the silence, Caleb stood there for a moment, watching, making sure. Then he lowered the rifle. His breath slow, controlled, like it meant nothing. But it did, because this wasn't just another fight. This was the first time in years he had chosen to protect someone. Inside the cabin, Caleb stepped back inside. Eli was sitting up on the bed, shaking. What happened? The boy asked, his voice trembling. Caleb set the rifle aside. Nothing you gotta worry about, he said. Eli looked toward the door, fear still in his eyes. Was that man bad? Caleb paused, then nodded. Yeah. Eli swallowed. Is he gone? Caleb looked at him. Yeah, he said quietly. He's gone. Eli slowly lay back down, pulling the blanket up to his chin. After a moment, he whispered, "Thank you, for not letting him take me." Caleb didn't answer right away. He just stood there. Then finally, "Get some sleep, kid." A new morning, a new problem. Morning came slowly. The storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the trees, casting a pale glow across the snow-covered ground. But peace didn't last long. Because outside, there were tracks, more than one, and they weren't from last night. Caleb stepped out, scanning the area. Boot prints, fresh, at least 3, maybe 4 men, heading straight toward the cabin. Caleb's expression darkened. That wasn't the end of it, he muttered. It was just the beginning. A choice that can't be undone. Inside, Eli sat quietly near the fire. He looked up as Caleb walked back in. Are we safe? He asked. Caleb didn't lie. No, he said. The boy's face fell slightly. Caleb grabbed his coat, weapons, and a small bag. But we're leaving, he added. Eli stood up quickly. Where? Caleb looked at him. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere no one would find them. But more importantly, somewhere he could make things right. Somewhere better, Caleb said. Then he held out his hand. Eli looked at it, hesitated for just a second. Then, he took it. The road of no return. The sun had barely risen when Caleb Vance and Eli stepped out of the cabin. The snow had stopped, but the cold remained sharp, cutting through the quiet morning like a warning. Caleb moved fast. He packed only what mattered. Food, water, ammunition, and a worn leather satchel he hadn't opened in years. Eli followed closely, his small boots crunching in the snow. Before leaving, he turned once more toward the cabin. What about my mom? He asked softly. Caleb paused. That question had been waiting. He walked back inside without a word. Moments later, he returned, carrying the woman carefully in his arms. We don't leave her behind, Caleb said. A burial in the snow. They didn't go far. Just beyond the tree line, where the ground softened slightly beneath the snow, Caleb stopped. He handed Eli a small blanket. Hold this, he said. Then he began to dig. With his hands, with a shovel, with everything he had. The ground was hard, frozen, unforgiving. But Caleb didn't stop, not even when his hands turned red. not even when the cold bit deep into his skin. Eli watched silently. After what felt like hours, the grave was ready. Caleb gently laid the woman inside. Eli stepped forward, clutching the blanket. "She liked this," he said quietly. "She used it when I got scared at night." Caleb nodded. "Then she keeps it," he said. Eli placed it over her. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't cry out loud. He just whispered, "Bye, Ma." Caleb stood beside him. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then finally, "She raised you right," Caleb said. "Don't forget that." Eli nodded slowly. Together, they covered the grave. And just like that, Eli was truly alone. Except, he wasn't anymore. Riders in the distance. As they walked back toward the cabin, Caleb froze. Something caught his eye. Movement. Far off, between the trees. Riders. 3 of them, closing in. Caleb's expression hardened instantly. "They found us faster than I thought," he muttered. Eli looked up, fear returning. "Who are they?" "Trouble," Caleb replied. "The escape begins." Caleb didn't hesitate. They rushed back to the cabin. Within minutes, Caleb had everything ready. 2 horses. One for him, one for Eli. "You ever ride?" Caleb asked. Eli shook his head nervously. Caleb lifted him up onto the saddle. "Hold tight," he said. "Don't let go." Eli grabbed the reins with shaking hands. "What about you?" Caleb mounted his own horse in one smooth motion. "I'll be right behind you." The sound of hooves echoed faintly in the distance now. Closer. Faster. Caleb looked back once at the cabin. That life was over. He knew it. Then, "Go," he shouted. The chase through the forest. The horses burst forward, cutting through the snow-covered forest paths. Branches snapped. Cold air rushed past. Eli held on tightly, his heart pounding. Behind them, gunshots. The riders had arrived. "Don't look back," Caleb shouted, but Eli couldn't help it. He turned slightly, and saw them. 3 men, armed, relentless. "They're coming," Eli yelled. "I know," Caleb replied. Caleb unleashed. Caleb pulled his horse alongside Eli's. "Stay straight. Don't stop," he ordered. Then he turned his horse sharply. Riding back, straight toward the danger. "Caleb," Eli shouted, but Caleb was already gone. The fight in the snow. The riders didn't expect it. A man running doesn't turn back. But Caleb wasn't running. Not anymore. He charged straight at them. Gun drawn. Eyes cold. The first rider raised his weapon. Too slow. Caleb fired. 1 shot. The man fell. The second rider fired back, grazing Caleb's arm. Blood stained his sleeve, but he didn't slow down. He fired again. Another man dropped. The third rider hesitated. That was his mistake. Caleb rode straight past him. Then turned. And fired. Silence fell once more. Only the wind remained. A man from the past. Caleb lowered his gun slowly. But, then, a 4th horse stepped out from behind the trees. This rider hadn't joined the chase. He had been watching. Waiting. Tall. Calm. Dangerous. "Still the fastest gun I know," the man said. Caleb froze. Because he knew that voice. "Didn't think I'd see you again," the man continued. Caleb's grip tightened. "I was hoppin', the same," he replied. The man smiled slightly. "Well, looks like your past finally caught up." Eli watched from a distance, confused and scared. "Caleb," he called out. The man's eyes shifted toward the boy. "Ah, so that's what this is about," he said. Then he looked back at Caleb. "You've changed." Caleb's voice turned cold. "No," he said, "I just remembered who I am." "The truth begins." The man stepped closer. "You can't run from this," he said. "You owe us." Caleb shook his head slightly. "I don't owe you anything." The man's smile faded. "You walked away," he said. "Left everything behind." Caleb didn't blink. "Yeah," he replied. "Worst mistake I ever made was joining you in the first place." Eli's heart raced. He didn't understand everything, but he understood one thing. Caleb wasn't just some quiet cowboy. He had a past, a dangerous one. A war is coming. The man turned his horse slowly. This ain't over, he said. It's just startin'. He looked at Eli one last time. Enjoy your time, kid, he added coldly. Then he rode off into the trees. Gone. But not for long. Back to the boy. Caleb rode back to Eli. The boy looked at him, wide-eyed. Who was that? Caleb took a deep breath. A long one. Then he said something he hadn't said in years. Someone I used to ride with. Eli swallowed. Are they coming back? Caleb looked ahead, toward the endless road. Yeah, he said. They are. Then he reached out his hand again. Come on. Eli took it, and together, they rode forward, not just away from danger, but straight towards something much bigger. The man he chose to be. The road stretched endlessly ahead. Snow slowly gave way to dry earth as Caleb Vance and Eli rode south, leaving the storm, and the past, behind. But not far enough, because some things don't stay buried. A town called Mercy Ridge. By sunset, they reached a small town. A wooden sign creaked in the wind. Mercy Ridge. Eli looked around, eyes wide. Is this where we stay? He asked. Caleb studied the town carefully. Quiet, but not empty, and more importantly, defensible. For now, Caleb said. A moment of peace. They found a small stable and a place to rest. For the first time in days, Eli smiled a little. He ate a warm meal, sat by a real fire, and slowly, the fear in his eyes began to fade. Caleb watched from across the room. He wasn't used to this peace. It felt unfamiliar, dangerous in its own way. Because peace gave you something to lose. The truth revealed. That night, Eli sat beside Caleb. You were a bad man before. The boy asked quietly. Caleb didn't react right away. Then he nodded. Yeah, he said. I was. Eli looked down. Are you still? Caleb stared into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes. I'm trying not to be, he replied. Eli thought about that, then said something simple, but powerful. You saved me. Caleb looked at him. No, he said softly. I'm just giving myself another chance. The past arrives. The next morning, it came. Hooves. Dust. Men. A lot of them. Caleb stood outside, already waiting. He knew they'd come, and this time, they didn't hide. At the front of the group was the same man from the forest. The one who knew Caleb. The one who knew everything. You always were stubborn, the man said, stepping forward. Caleb didn't move. And you always talk too much, Caleb replied. The man smiled. Last chance, he said. Come back with us. Caleb shook his head. That life's done. The man's expression turned cold. Then, you don't leave me much choice. The final stand. Eli watched from inside, heart pounding. Caleb stood alone in the street, facing them all, but he wasn't afraid, not anymore, because this time, he wasn't fighting for himself. The fight for redemption. The first shot rang out. Then chaos. Caleb moved like a storm. Fast, precise, every movement calculated. He took cover, fired, moved again. Men dropped one by one, but they kept coming. More shots, more danger. A bullet grazed his side. Another hit his shoulder, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. Inside, Eli clenched his fists. Come on, he whispered. You can do this. The final confrontation. Soon, it was just the two of them. Caleb, and the man from his past. They stood facing each other in the dust. Breathing heavy. Guns ready. You could have had it all, the man said. Caleb shook his head. I got what I need. He glanced briefly toward the building behind him. Toward Eli. That was enough. The man smirked. Then let's finish it. 2 shots. At the same time, silence followed. The man staggered, then fell. Gone. After the dust settled, the town stood still. No one spoke. No one moved. Caleb lowered his gun slowly. Blood stained his shirt. His breathing was heavy. But he was still standing. Eli ran out. "Caleb," he shouted. He stopped in front of him, eyes full of worry. "You're hurt." Caleb gave a small, tired smile. "I've been worse," he said. A new beginning. Days passed. The wounds healed slowly. The town of Mercy Ridge offered them a place to stay. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Caleb helped rebuild what was damaged. Fixed fences. Protected the town. And for the first time in a long time, he belonged somewhere. Eli stayed close. Always. The question that changed everything. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Eli sat beside Caleb. "What happens now?" he asked. Caleb looked out at the horizon. Then down at the boy. A long pause. Then, "If you want," Caleb said slowly, "you can stay with me." Eli's eyes widened. "For real?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah." Eli didn't hesitate. He hugged him tightly. Caleb froze for a second. Then, slowly, he placed a hand on the boy's back. The man he became. People used to fear Caleb Vance. They whispered his name, avoided his path, but not anymore. Now, they told a different story. About a man who walked away from darkness. About a boy who found a second chance. About a moment in the snow. That changed everything. Final line perfect for YouTube ending. Sometimes, the coldest days bring the hardest choices. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is choosing not to walk away. Please friends spot my channel, subscribe for more stories.